We are going to be joined by Dr. Rashid Khalidi, author of several books, including the wonderful, The 100 Years' War on Palestine. He was also an advisor to the Palestinian delegation to the Madrid and Washington Arab-Israeli peace negotiations from October 1991 until June 1993. He is the Edward Said Professor at Columbia University. And I could read many more accolades about him, but I think I'd rather just have him on for that much longer. So welcome to the show, Professor Khalidi.
Thank you, Katie.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining.
It's a pleasure.
So I want to start off by playing actually a clip of you speaking at Columbia University, because I think what you say is really important, and it's a great kind of jumping off point for this whole discussion, which will of course land in Gaza and Rafah in particular. But let's take a look at what you said here.
The Vietnam War stopped because the people opposed it, and the people who led that were students. Students have been on the right side of history at Columbia and at other universities ever since the 1960s. We today honor the students who in 1968 opposed a genocidal, illegal, shameful war. Columbia University honors them. They're on the Columbia website. You can check it out yourself. 1968 is commemorating. One day, what our students did here will be commemorated in the same way. They are and they were on the right side of history. And that will go down in history. That when the change finally came, and finally the American people who have already opposed this war, who've already opposed this genocide, are able to force their craven politicians to stop it, which we can do. The United States is part of this war. Every plane bombing Gaza is an American plane, F-16s, F-15s, F-35s. Every helicopter, Apache, is American. Every bomb drop is American. Those are our taxes. Those are our representatives. Shame on them. And shame on the administration of this university. They will go down in infamy for having done what they did the other night. Today, nobody remembers the names of the administrators and the trustees who ordered the police onto the Columbia campus on 1968. They have gone down in ignominy. So will these leaders, President Shafiq and the Board of Trustees. And the students will be remembered one day on a Columbia website as the people who helped change the course of this country.
What was it like there on campus? Were you dodging all the swastikas and Nazi salutes? I'm being sarcastic, obviously, for those who don't watch this show. But what was it like being there, especially given how the media has presented these encampments?
It just happened that the beginning of the encampment coincided with my being in Europe to do talks on European editions of my book. German edition just came out this month. And so at the end of April, when the encampment went up, I was actually in France. The lecture there was canceled. The rector of the university canceled it. But and I had similar experiences in other European countries. We don't need to go into that. So I arrived the night before the police came on the campus. I returned to New York. I was in touch, of course, with my colleagues, faculty, who have been involved in this from the beginning in trying to support the students. And I was aware of the enormous stress that the first police arrests and the first dismantlement of the encampment involved. And then I was there when the police came on, and after the occupation of Hamilton Hall, what the students called Hind Hall, I was in New York, and we couldn't get anywhere near the campus. There was a huge police cordon all around the Morningside campus. It was traumatic. The campus is still a bit of a police state to this day. Many Columbia affiliates still can't get on campus. Slowly but surely they're opening it up, but it's still highly restricted. And for quite a while after the police stormed onto the campus, nobody could get on, nor faculty nor students. It was essentially the neoliberal vision of a university. No students, no faculty, only administrators and police, for a little while there anyway.
And I just want to point out that one of the people next to you is actually Joseph Howley, who is a Jewish
Right.
professor of classics, which I think
Yeah,
is an
he's standing
important
right
point.
next to
Yeah,
me in the high vis,
right. Yeah.
much bigger than me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's nice. It's a nice juxtaposition. But I think that's something that's so important because as we've covered on the show and a lot of people have covered, the media's attempt to present these encampments as some kind of anti-Semitic unsafe places for Jews is really undermined by the video evidence.
Right. Well, I know you'll be talking to somebody who photographed some of this, and
Right.
he can perhaps go into it. But this is an idea that has been propagated by people who are uncomfortable at the fact that a narrative which has completely and utterly dominated American politics and media for 5, 6, 7 generations has suddenly been displaced among most young people. They just don't believe the line that their parents and grandparents have been fed, and that people tended to believe that everything Israel does and did is justified, and the Palestinians are just a bunch of rootless terrorists. Whatever their understanding of the politics of it today may be, most young people understand that that's not right. And the fact that there are some who still don't, still are very committed to Israel and feel deeply uncomfortable at the ideas that they've grown up with being minority ideas, is where I think you get this narrative of unsafe.
Right.
It's a shift. I mean, when I was a student back in the 60s, saying anything about Palestine was, to say the least, uncomfortable. Quite often, much more than uncomfortable. We were a tiny, tiny minority. So I can relate to how people who now are in a minority by the votes that we've seen on things like divestment at Columbia 4 years ago among students, by the vote in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, 3-1, or was it 2.5-1? I forget. The Faculty of Arts and Sciences voting no confidence in the president for her behavior. That's a shift for people, and that's uncomfortable. Did it mean that they were unsafe? Well, I think the visual evidence shows that that's really basically untrue.
Right. And the people who are unsafe are the ones who are at various campuses being physically attacked either by police and or by pro-Zionist protesters who
Right,
are finally
as at
starting to get
UCLA,
right at
or
UCLA. Yeah.
or
Or,
people off campus, the
right.
young men who were shot in, I think,
Oh,
Vermont,
of course. Right.
the
Which,
child who was murdered in Illinois.
yeah.
The only people, the people who've been the most harmed are in fact people identified as Palestinian, or people protesting in support of Palestine.
And there's been no hearings about that, about
Oh, of course not.
Palestinian safety. You were talking about how disingenuous the right is with its alleged concern with anti-Semitism when these are people who are fine, rubbing shoulders with or dog whistling anti-Semitism.
Right. I mean, the party of Donald Trump, who called a bunch of neo-Nazis marching in a torchlight parade through a university in Virginia, chanting "Jews will not replace us,"
very fine people on both sides.
that party is defending Jews it's obnoxious, it's nauseating, it's absolutely obscene.
Yeah.
This is not a party that cares about Jewish people in the United States. In fact, it is a welcome home for white supremacists and neo-Nazis. I'm not suggesting that the people on that committee, the House committee that's been grilling university presidents and that has posed this as a threat to the safety of Jewish students and talks about a plague of anti-Semitism. I'm not suggesting that they are necessarily neo-Nazis or that they are necessarily white supremacists, but that's the party of neo-Nazis and white supremacists, welcomed by the president, by Trump himself when he was president. Just going back to that clip that you ran at the beginning, a couple things are happening, as I see it, as this endless war seems to drag on forever. I think that it's produced a change, or the beginning of a change, certainly among young people and students, but I think among broad sectors of European and American public opinion. It's shifting as a result of people seeing this unremitting violence. This is since 1948 the longest war in Palestine, or the longest episode of war. The 6-Day War was 6 days.
Right.
Even the war of attrition along the Suez Canal, it was mainly uninhabited areas. This is a war against a population. We're seeing it day in, day out, and it's causing a shift in public opinion. At the same time, there's almost hysterical reaction to that shift on the part of elites. They are unhinged. The police state brutality and the extreme rhetoric being used by people like Representative Fox or Representative Stefanik and the Republicans generally about these demonstrations is an indication, not that they're unhinged, but that they see this as a real threat to the hegemony of a discourse and of an approach to the Middle East and of an American imperial set of policies and of an attitude towards Israel, which is really under threat from below. And it's not under threat from a bunch of students. The students are the tip of an iceberg. Look at the unions, the United Auto Workers, the nurses, the postal workers. Look at the Black pastors by their hundreds, by their thousands. Look at other minorities. Look at Jewish Voice for Peace. Look at this huge dissident element in the Jewish community. Huge. Not a majority, certainly, but enormous, and enormous numbers of young people in particular. Yeah. And what is clear is that these people are raging against a tide that they're really terrified of. In the Democratic Party, I think that there is now a strong majority against this war. There's a strong majority against the president's policies. There's a strong majority in favor. And in fact, that's probably the case among American public opinion as a whole. And the elites that are deeply committed to this war and to Israel doing whatever it wants feel threatened. And that sense of threat has led them to almost hysterical excess in their repression on campus, rhetorically, and I'm afraid also legally. I think we're going to see the passage of laws. We're going to see the utilization of existing laws in ways that are grossly anti-democratic and that are fundamental violations of the First Amendment, where that's applicable. And we're going to see enormous infringements on academic freedom.
Yeah.
The way in which university administrations have responded to their faculties and their students. These are majorities in most cases of faculty and students, and they treat them with utmost contempt. The faculty voted by a vote of more than 2-1, no confidence in the president. 2 days later, the two chairs of the Board of Trustees of Columbia University said, we have consulted with students and we've consulted with, well, if you've consulted with students and consulted with faculty, they would have slapped you across the face and told you everything you've done is wrong. And we disapprove entirely. And here's a vote of no confidence by the entire Faculty of Arts and Sciences. So this is going to lead to some nasty things in the immediate future, I'm afraid, legally, rhetorically, in terms of repression, in terms of the employment of the police, and in terms of police violence. We have a problem with violence, of police violence. It's mainly directed against communities of color, obviously, but it's directed against poor people, the homeless, and others as well. And here, that violence is now being directed against the children of the elite in the universities.
Right.
And this is not going to go away as long as this war continues. I'm afraid it looks like it's not going to stop very soon. I hope it does. These breaches, this gulf is going to grow wider, and the repression, I'm afraid, may grow more intense.
And we should also give shouts out to Humboldt and CUNY, because they have been at the forefront also, and they're not
Right.
Ivy League. So
Right.
and I know
community
you
colleges,
mentioned,
state universities. It's not just the Ivy League.
Yeah.
It's right across. And again, that's the tip of the iceberg. The students are just expressing what a majority of young people feel.
Right.
And they in turn represent what is probably now becoming a majority of Americans.
Yeah.
Deep unease with this war and with how Israel's waging it, and with the unwisdom of this administration in supporting it to the hilt.